Good evening, ladies and gents. Welcome back to the final Fallout Bar of this week's action from the World Grand Prix. Myself, Jack Howard, joined by the man who's been in the hot seat for most of the week, Mr. Dan Simpson. Dan, first of all, fantastic night at semi-final action, but how you doing?
I'm very well, mate. Yeah, really well. If I'm honest, a little bit earlier than I thought. I'm not complaining. I'm not complaining, but there was a spell tonight where I thought this could be definitely a post midnight. We could be doing the show tomorrow, was where I thought we were going to be at. So, yeah,
that was just from the very first checkout of the first semi-final.
That was watching Dimitri come for that 1-3-2.
Here we go again.
This could be a long old night, but the evening certainly picked up a pace in that second semi-final. Interesting night. Although for the first time in history, it went pretty much exactly as I predicted last night. But on reflection, I don't really know how else it could have gone. You know, it seemed like those predictions were fairly easy to make, and I don't think anyone should be really bragging too much about getting them on the nose, because it sort of went exactly the way I think most people thought, didn't it?
Well, the least said about predictions, the better for now, given my one and only earlier appearance during the week that went terribly, terribly wrong. Let's say hello to a few people in the chat room, as we always do. Sarah's in. She says, well, that was a long and quick game tonight. Video Smurf's in as well. Who else do we have in the chat? Bob, one of our members, is in. Good to have you back once again, Bob. Kieran Randall's in. Good to see you, pal. Scott McLaughlin's in. How we doing? Patrick is in. He says, evening, lads. Shelty says, evening, everybody. Darren says, good evening. Cross-court tennis, the set with a 170, 110. It was pure cinema for that last semi. Oh, my God, man. Yeah, we'll get onto that indeed. Maliki, hi, everyone. Humphries produces absolute filth tonight, just a little bit. Matthew's in as always, and now says Decker knocked out Ando Wade. Daz says big up Gob and Dan, and Joel says what's up. All will say hello to a few more as the show goes on. First of all, Dan, let's talk about the tournament as a whole. Actually, we'll probably do this on Monday as well, but given that we are heading into the final, this is the last chance we're going to get.
I'm not on Monday, so I'll do it now.
Oh, yeah, you've pulled a sickie at the last minute.
I'm at a conference and I'm unable to even do it from a hotel room, so I'm having to be absent, sadly.
You've been here for pretty much every show of the week so far. Just sum up how you think this World Grand Prix has gone.
I think it's been a really, really good tournament. I think up until this evening, what we'd really missed was a great big monster performance from a top player. I think up until today, the best we'd probably seen anybody play who was it? Ross Smith, I think.
Yeah, maybe an early round Chisnell against Cammy.
Yeah, I think. But I think so that one he only averaged 91. So yeah. it was good, but it wasn't amazing. That opening round where Ross Smith, and I know it was only over 2 sets. He won 2-0, so it was quite a shorter game. But when Smith averaged that 101, that was really good. But I think what we saw this evening was all that was missing. Was a real monster, dominant performance from one of the elite players. But I think it's been good. It's certainly produced some stories. You know, we've seen Michael Van Gerwen whitewash. We've seen runs to the semi-finals and to the final from players that nobody expected, which we know that this is the perfect tournament for that. You know, if we're going to see rogue runs where someone comes from nowhere and ends up being able to put a few wins together, it's here in the UK Open, isn't it? They're the
format, isn't it? They're the levelers, aren't they? Like match play, you've got to be a good front runner, you've got to be prepared to chase. Set play, you've got to have a bit of bottle in those deciding legs. But actually, these two this and the UK Open just ruined some of that a little bit. In that the UK Open, you can never really settle. You can't really plan your route ahead. 1 minute you could be playing the world number 64, and the next minute you're playing the world number 1 and the world number 2 in back-to-back games. But this one, the double start, it just leaves so many more chances in a leg, isn't it, to pile on the pressure.
Yeah, and I think that bottom half of the draw was so open that the fact that we didn't have any seeds left by the time we got to the quarterfinal stage, it sums up this event entirely. But I think it's been a really good event. I often see the Grand Prix as the sort of the kickoff to the busy season. This is almost the launch event that carries us into this back end of the year. But I think, there was a few surprises, a few players that'll have something to think about after it. Obviously, Michael Van Gerwen, an early exit. Luke Littler, an early exit. But then we saw some promising signs from players like Nathan Aspinall, which, although he didn't go deep in the tournament, we certainly saw his throw in a much better place than it was. Good runs from Rob Cross and James Wade. Clay,
Joe Cullen in there as well, who've struggled the last couple of years for players that have won major titles and been Premier League competitors and contenders and winners, if you like, in the last couple of years. It was good to see those back. I think
we've become so used to a Luke being in the final, and we've got it again. So we've got Luke Humphries is in the final once again, but it has just reminded us, I think, that there is some inconsistent form among, if you like, the Premier League set. The Premier League set that we saw this year. Peter Wright, Gerwyn Price, Michael Smith. There is inconsistency in all of those players, and then there are other players that haven't been in that scene for the last 18 months that are just showing signs, just sort of roots of growing back to where they were, the likes of Cullen and Clayton, and they're not there yet. But it's definitely a good sign at this time of year, because the big events come thick and fast. And if some of these guys can find some form, then come the World Championships, we could be looking at some very, very tasty fixtures.
I mean, all that does is make our job harder for the next few weeks of predicting tournament winners. It's been relatively standard up until this point. And to be honest, spoiler alert, I don't think that's going to change much heading into tomorrow. But let's review this evening's action, starting with that Mike Decker and Dimitri Vandenberg all Belgian battle in the first semi-final of the evening. At youth level, I was fortunate enough to witness this firsthand, being very similar age to both of these players. There wasn't a lot to separate this pair in terms of Dev Tour runs and finals and bashing each other up all over. Mike Decker would have been quietly, what's the word I'm looking for here? Not upset, but a little bit miffed that the run that Dimmy's put together over the last couple of years hasn't been Mike's career. Given that they were so parallel at youth level, to see someone who he's competed with at that standard for so long leap above him by so much will have probably hurt Mike a fair bit. But tonight, it's just a little step on the way back to getting some of that back in his favour, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah, it certainly is. And I think this isn't a surprise. Yes, I suppose we can say it's a surprise that Mike Decker's made the final. But the level of darts that he's played isn't really a big surprise to people who've sort of followed him for the last few years, because everybody knows, including him and Dimitri, that he's got that game in him. He just whereas Dimmy, as you say, managed to find that A game with some level of consistency on a big stage, Mike hasn't. And it's the first time we've really seen him break through and find that A game regularly. And I think it's worth just noting his route to the final, because I'm not sure there's a harder run that anyone's had this year. If you look at the way that some of the players he met have been playing and who they are, he's come through Damon Heta in the opening round, which I think many people would never have picked him to win. In fact, I picked Damon Heta for a semi-final in this event. I was absolutely convinced that we were going to get a big run from Damon Heta. He's a tremendous player. Gary Anderson has been arguably playing as well as anyone on the planet in the last 6 months. James Wade,
superb in the opening round as well.
Well, yeah, absolutely. James Wade is James Wade. One of the greats of the sport, and is finding form with some levels of consistency, and he's winning matches. He's winning matches on TV. And then he's come through, Dimitri Vandenberg, major winner, fellow countryman, lots of pressure. I think his run isn't. If you put that on paper 3 weeks ago and say that's what you've got to do to get to the final, it's brutal. It's an awful run.
You wouldn't have fancied it at all, would you?
But absolutely not. No chance.
The real deal by name, the real deal by nature, perhaps. He's threatened a big breakthrough from the Pro Tour this year, hasn't he? We've seen him in finals. We've seen him go on and compete. His 180 hitting has always been superb. But there was a level of maturity to the performance tonight, especially after the first set started in the manner it did. Dimi immediately getting into his rhythm, but I think knocking Mike out of his a little bit shell-shocked after that first set. But to respond in the way that Mike did, I just thought was excellent.
Yeah, it was tremendous. I think we need to probably address the very early stage of that match. So back to the entrances where, we talked a little bit, and we have talked quite a lot about the way the crowd is receiving Dimitri Vandenberg at present. Now, we were in the room in the UK Open, in the final of the UK Open this year, and we watched the crowd turn. But what happened was the crowd turned because of what was going on stage, and they've begun to boo and jeer and become frustrated. What we saw tonight, very clearly from the opening sort of words of Dimitri being announced to the stage, is the crowd were having absolutely none of it. He was booed on his walk-on. They didn't allow him to do his dance. The moment the dance started, the boos just became louder and louder, and he just sort of, all right, fair enough, I won't do that. And I think that's really interesting, because I think that's only going to increase. That's not going to fizzle out. I think that's as we get more big events in big arenas, it's going to become a thing. And that's where and the interesting thing will be whether or not he decides to lean into that and to play to it, as we've seen players do in the past, or whether he just gets on, or whether he throws at a better pace. But the crowd were having absolutely none of him at all. And I think it did take De Decker out of his rhythm, as well as what Dimi's sort of antics and pace and things as well. I think the crowd's involvement did, but I just think he did a brilliant job, De Decker, of sort of putting the blinkers on and concentrating on his game.
Is that going to be something that's difficult for Dimi to manage and get used to? Look, like I said, we are seeing it that little bit more and that bit of response. In the past, when we've seen it turn towards a player, you can sort of pinpoint one moment or one behaviour. Going Price was a little Marmite anyway, but then obviously you've got the incident with Gary Anderson at the Grand Slam. He's the pantomime villain straight after that. In the past, when players have become that, they've either been that persona from the very start, or there's been a big incident that has turned people against them. Petrescu, Grand Slam, kicking off about support against Bo Greaves, despite winning the Euro Tour in his home country 2.5 weeks before that. That sort of thing. Dimi has always been looked upon as fun, easygoing. Isn't this guy brilliant? Speaks loads of languages. Look at him always smiling and laughing. That turn is going to be a little bit more difficult for him to process and perhaps even comprehend.
It is. And I think what it's a sign of is, and it's a bit of a lesson to some other players as well, is that you can't force the crowd. You can't force the crowd along something that they don't want. You can shove it down their neck a little bit, and you can say, well, we're going to do this dancing, and we're going to do this, and we're going to, and you're going to enjoy it. But then you can't force it, because they just won't go with you. They won't. The crowd and darts fans are a very interesting and quite unique group, and they are influenced very much by. In fact, what they tend to do is push back. When they feel like something's being pushed upon them and that they are being forced to think or feel a certain way, the darts crowd will often rebel against that. I genuinely don't know how he's going to deal with it. I feel like he's got some sensible people around him, and I think he's pretty well advised, and therefore will probably try and just blinker off to it. and shut down. I think the more that he gets engaged in it, the worse it will be.
Indeed. As for Mike, though, into his first major televised semi-final, and this is what he had to say at the end of it.
No, Luke will always be the favorite, especially the way he's been playing after the Worlds and before the Worlds. No. Luke will always be the massive favorite. I'm not even thinking about Premier League or stuff like that. I'm probably top 30 of the world now, and the Premier League is top 8. So I'm not thinking about Premier League now.
Two things there. One, very, very noticeable that interview was done before the end of the Humphries versus Joyce game, and his only intention was on Luke being the favourite. And secondly, that question's popped up a little bit on social media already this evening. Should it have, especially if it had been a Dideca Joyce final, the days of winning one major and it getting you in seem to be long gone, though, don't they? Like, Dimmy, maybe if he'd gone on to win this, would have then been in with a shout because of world rankings, the fact he's been in it before, World Series, etc., and all of that image thing that goes with it. Mike's got that little bit more to do, even if he lifts the title tomorrow, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think if Dimitri Vandenberg had made the final, then I think he's pretty much in the Premier League, carrying that UK Open as well, which he still will be when the Premier League selections are made. So I think that would have pretty much secured Dimmy's spot at the Premier League. I think that even if Mike and Ryan had won the event, that wouldn't have been enough in and of itself for those two players. They'll have to do something else later in the year. It certainly means that Mike Dideca is going to be in the conversation, even if he gets stuffed in the final. That when people talk about the Premier League, certainly for the next 3 or 4 months, his name will be included in that conversation. But he is going to have to do more in the next few months to keep his name further up, because unfortunately, there will still be a very heavy view from within certain circles that players who haven't won anything for 2 years have more of a claim to that spot, and that haven't made a final for a couple of years have more of a claim to that spot. I think it's probably a bit early to go too deep into it, but his name's there. He's on the long list, if you like. I don't think he's on the short list yet, but he's on the long list.
Someone that is the very, very top of the short list right now is Luke Humphries, though. What a truly destructive performance from Cool Hand Luke. Over the 100 average, 5-0. He's barely dropped a leg all night. I saw a tweet saying that's one of the best performances you're ever going to see in the Grand Prix. I was like, it's one of the best performances you're going to see in darts, full stop. He was magnificent, Dan.
Yeah, I said it last night, that he was just due. Like he had been, for those first few games, as he'd worked his way through the tournament, he had held people at bay. You know, he held Stephen Bunting. Yes, I don't know if I want to say that he had a scare against Stephen Bunting. But once he got in front there, he held him off. Ricardo Petrescu and Johnny Clayton, he very much held them, just kept them. And every time either of them did anything to try and make some inroads on him, he didn't need another gear. He just sort of found a little bit extra, just put his foot down a little bit and just kept out of the way. What we were due to see from him was a monster, dominant, world #1 performance. And that's exactly what he came out and did tonight. And I thought it was due that he would be able to come out. I thought he would need someone coming at him in a way that was taking sets off him to motivate that performance, to drag that performance out of him. But it didn't. It cannot be understated how well Ryan Joyce played in that game. And it is a genuine travesty that the record books will show that was a 5-0 defeat, because that performance that performance Ryan Joyce put in tonight beats virtually every other player in virtually every other match of this tournament. And I know it's at the semi-final stage. You should be that good if you're there. But the way that Ryan played, he would have beaten virtually every other player in virtually every other game of this tournament. But unfortunately for Ryan Joyce, he was playing the best player in the world. And
15-3 in legs this evening. However, when you do look at the stats, Joyce has matched Humphries in turns, matched him in turn 40s, only trailing turn 80s. The fact that Ryan Joyce has just rocked up average 94 and is 42%, but has only been allowed 7 darts at a double in a match that's lasted 18 legs, is ridiculous from Luke Humphries. It doesn't make sense. 4 ton plus checkouts in there for him. 15 of 25 for 60% on the outer ring as well. Every single time, Joyce seemed to put himself ahead in a leg. He gives himself a 3-dart advantage. Humphries gets in, bangs in a 180. It was a masterclass in timing. It was a masterclass in finishing. And as good as Ryan was, this game is the definitive proof there are levels to this game. And Luke Humphries just went up levels.
It is, and that exactly that. It's you are he just was no matter what you do with him, when he's playing like this, he's never out of a leg. He's always there. You think you get 3 darts at a double, and he's on 146. He'll still have you because he can just come and do that. And then it was just ton plus checkout after ton plus checkout after ton plus checkout. If you gave him a sniff of a leg, if you allowed him to have a look at it, he would just take it tonight. And that's the form that he's in. Some of the double hitting was so good towards the back end of that match. Once the finishing line was in sight, it was frightening. Like that fifth leg, the fifth set, those 3 legs, he needed 3 doubles to get them done. He was 100% on his doubles in the 5th leg. Now, interestingly enough, in the 5th set, in the 4th set, he was 100% on his doubles. He checked out, so he won 6 legs with 6 darts at double. That happens so rarely, and I don't like how you run out of how good that is. It's just so impressive. It's clinical to a level that we rarely see in this sport. To go to win 2 sets without missing a dart at double is so impressive.
Yeah, ridiculous. If someone goes up there and wins a Pro Tour match 6-0 without missing a dart, they'll be like, Jesus, that's unbelievable. To do it in sets in that environment up on TV is certainly superb. I watched the post-match interview on stage with Luke, and it seems that Ryan was full of praise for him and used a certain former 16-time world champion to compare the performance to. And when Luke mentioned it, he's like, no chance. And then Wayne Mardle turned around and go, no, actually, it really was. That was Phil Taylor-esque. That performance was on a par with the greatest player that we've ever seen play darts.
Yeah, there are less than a handful of players that we have ever seen who have been able to do that to people. And it's Phil Taylor, and it was a period of time for Michael Van Gerwen. That's really all we've ever seen, where that player could just, whenever they needed to call upon it, play a game that no one in the world can compete with. Yeah. Everybody else in the world on their best day can't compete. And if you're not,
his B game is so good, and his C game is so good. He doesn't have to call on it very often either.
You know, if you're a top 32 player, you've got to be at your absolute best to take a leg off him. That's where he's at. It's incredible. It's amazing to watch. And again, you feel, and you shouldn't, because it's professional sport. You shouldn't feel sorry for a player who's getting their hats handed to them. But sometimes when people come up, certainly when they play the way they did, like Ryan Joyce does not deserve a 5-0 scoreline in the record books. And when people look back on it in a few years' time, and then all they do is look at numbers like we do, you look at what happened in this year and that year, it'll just become he got bashed up 5-0 in the final, and that wasn't what happened.
First ever televised ranking semi-final bashed up.
That wasn't what happened at all, in reality.
You make a world semi, was it? World's quarter?
Quarter.
Yeah, first ever televised world semi. We've already played you the clip from the Mike Didaka interview. That will be available in full on our YouTube channel. We don't have the Luke Humphries clip yet. Phil will still be in Leicester working away. Obviously, Luke was very, very busy at the end of the show as well. But that will be available in full on our YouTube channel. Let's say hello to a few more people in the chat room. Anthony is in. How we're doing? Bob says 4-ton plus finishes for Humphries, yeah, including that magnificent 146. Yonder says, do people think players should be allowed to stall before throwing as Dimmy has done throughout the tournament? Is there a time limit in terms of how long players can stand at the occupy without throwing? The honest answer is, once the other player's out of the way, you can take as long as you want. Do we necessarily agree with that when we've seen a player of Dimmy's caliber play at a much nicer rhythm? No. It's more... Thing is, it becomes more agreeable on players, Dan, that have done it their entire life. Someone like a Scott Mitchell is quite deliberate, or Richard Rowlands, who plays at the seniors. He's another who you will have seen recently, or Matt Clark, or whoever, that have their rhythm, that have the procedure that they go through before they throw a dart. And every single time you just go, that's just them. I think the issue that people have with Dimitri is he can, and has shown, and when he wants to, just switches it on and goes, look how brilliant and free-flowing I am. And that's where people have got an issue with Dimmy when he does slow it down, because not that it's unnatural to Dimmy, but because he has the ability to go 2 different paces or multiple different paces. The presumption is that if he slowed it down, it's for a reason, and that reason is to put his opponent off. That's where it comes from.
Yeah, and that is often challenging, because again, you know, we're all darts fans. Darts fans are a funny breed, and often we have a funny take on things. But there is often, certainly if you look out into social media and the feeling in the crowd, can often be one that when he does that, is that there is a perception that he isn't doing that for himself, as in to settle himself in order to be able to go and throw what he needs to throw. And there is a perception that when he carries on like that, it is all about mind games. Now, only one person really knows that. Like, only Dimitri Vandenberg knows what's going through his mind at that time. Everybody else is just speculating. But what happens is people speculate, and it becomes what people accept, doesn't it? And you end up with a crowd full of people that perceive that he's playing mind games with his opponent, and that's how the crowd ends up where it is. But I do think he is at risk of that becoming worse and it becoming a bigger thing. And I think he could end up in a vicious circle, because I think as that increases and the pressure is on, the way that he will cope with that will be to go and take a little break, go and take an extra drink of water, have a walk off 8 steps away from the hockey to the other side of the stage, come back again, step back from the hockey, step back onto the hockey. And all that time, it's just amplifying the feeling that's in the crowd. And, you know, we saw it in Minehead where, and it becomes, the crowd becomes hypersensitive to it, where every time he has so much as a regrip, they think, oh, he's at it again. So the crowd do become hypersensitive to it, and he'll end up getting more stick than he's due because of that. But I cannot see a scenario where it doesn't continue and doesn't get worse.
Yeah, indeed. One last word on Dimmy, by the way, before we do move on. Obviously, like you said, UK Open champion, now made the semi-final of the Grand Prix, quarter-finalist at the match play as well. He's not doing too badly for a bloke who is quite probably having the worst season to date, or perception of form-wise. Like, there is no form anywhere. On the floor, there's nothing. The Euro Tour has not been a happy hunting ground for him either, but he's rocked up in the 3 televised majors. I'm not counting the World Series finals. That can get in the bin. And he's produced a quarterfinal, a semi-final, a win, and a 9-darter on TV along the way, by the way.
Well, so I just had a little look down there, and I mean, yes, he stunk the place out a bit at the World Championships. You know, he didn't have a great start there, but then, yeah, won the UK Open, quarter-final of the match play, semi-final of the Grand Prix. He's also done a semi-final in the Masters, semi-finalist in the World Cup. You know, it seems like virtually every time the guy gets on TV this year, he manages to get himself deep. You know, I'd sort of forgot that he made that semi-final at the Masters. That seemed like a long time ago. The World Cup, I don't know how we forgot the World Cup. But it just seems to happen for him on TV.
Yeah.
I don't know why. He's
approaching the perfect time of the season for that to happen for him just a little bit more. Now, like I said, Luke Humphries' interview isn't available for you yet, but that will be available in full on our YouTube channel very, very shortly. So go over and check that out once the show is over. However, we do have to look ahead to tomorrow night's final in Leicester. Mighty Decker against Luke Humphries, the best of 11 sets, Dan. A lot of people did forget that announcement was made earlier this year in April that the semis and finals are now being played over a longer format. I think it was quite well received and celebrated at the time as well, but it is a really big jump from best of 5 into best of 9, I thought, into this evening. However,
I'm fine with it. I liked it. The difficulty that I think I had with it this evening was the criminally late start. That was the problem. I think, and I appreciate that this is probably out of the control of the PDC. My assumption is that it's a Sky Sports decision because they wanted it to be on main event, and then the rugby.
It clashed with the Rugby Super League final.
Yeah, and this is it. But I think the format is superb, but it would work far better if it started at 7:30.
Yeah. Would we have gone best of 7 for the quarterfinals? And build it up all the way, or is there a chance that?
No, I'd be happy with that.
Playing best of 5s early on, perhaps. Let's do tournament as a whole again, a little bit. Format. I still feel best of 2 or best of 3 is way too short early doors for a tournament of this caliber. Match plays a race to 10. You've got Grand Slam group stages race to whatever, but you get 3 group games before that.
I think 3, 5, 7, 11 is a nice progression.
Yeah.
That, you know, and whilst I agree that first round is short, it does
save us 2 more days of this.
Yeah, but it does also. I like to manifest chaos, as you know, and that is about as chaotic as it can get because it's that perfect storm of set play, double in, and ridiculously short format that can only give us drama and chaos and strange things to happen and odd things. It can own the format's perfect for that. So I'm fine with that in the first round. If you don't get in quick, you're knackered. Come back next year. But I think that's fine because it's the beginning of major season. And I think it's not very long before you get another go at something. You know, you do get to. It's not like if you stink out the match play, you've got a real lull, and you're wondering when where's your TV format and when's it going to come next. I think this is not so much. You can come in with good form. If you do have a stinker in the first round, you sort of know that. You know it's short. You know it was double in. You can take all that on board, and it doesn't hurt you too much in terms of the bigger picture. But I quite like 3, 5, 7, 9, 11 as a progression.
Leicester has now effectively become the home of the Grand Prix. I think the crowd's been a little hit and miss. It's certainly been busier over the last week. It's still not my favourite venue that we play at for anything. The shape or size of it, something just seems to be slightly off. At one point, it felt like they were pumping fake crowd news onto the broadcast. But I think it's becoming a little better than what it has been the last couple of years.
Definitely better this year. Mm-hmm. Definitely better. And in fact, I'd go as far as to say the best year we've had there, without a doubt. I think you're always going to struggle with a midweek tournament. It just is what it is. And I think geographically, no matter where
4 weeks since the kids have gone back to school as well. It didn't even sneak in the back of the summer holidays or anything like that. Like parents are back at work. There's no half term coming up. There's no late night for kids or babysitters or anything like that. People have just had time off for the summer or are now looking forward to Halloween, Christmas, bonfire night, and all of those things that they've got to prepare for and pay for. And it's not quite party time, is it? Like, you can sort of get excited in November for December, but it's just that little bit far out for that.
Yeah, I think it's always going to be a challenge to fill a big venue. The difficulty you've got is you need the same venue all week, but you are invariably always going to be able to get a bigger crowd on a Friday and a Saturday than you are on a Wednesday. But you have to have it in the same venue, and that venue has to hold enough people so that you can sell all your tickets for a Friday and a Saturday night. I don't think it's I think the perfect venue for something like this is a space that has tiered seating along the sides.
Yeah.
Because what that allows you to do is open different parts of that and sections of it as the week goes on for your busier spells, and you can keep that central space full. You can keep that whole central space to the back wall full of people, and then where or to whatever you put at the back of it, and then you can have, you know, the tier that the camera hits the most often.
Yeah.
You could start to fill that first, and you could keep one side closed all week if you needed to, because you don't get a camera shot onto that. The camera never pans to that side of the crowd. I think that would suit it better because you would just feel like you were watching a full arena. I think the involvement from the crowd's been up and down. I did not like when it appeared that we were getting some piped in crowd noise. I just think it's too easy to spot, and it kills it straight away. But the only way to kill an atmosphere worse than having crap crowd noise is to pump in fake crowd noise.
Because nobody even bothers anymore, do they? Like, well, they're playing a track now anyway.
Correct. So yeah, up and down, but better than it's been for a few years. I think there's tweaks. I think there's things they could do better with it, but it's good.
Bring it back to Dublin and get a full crowd overnight. I love the optimism, Bob, but that just wasn't true, was it? The midweek sessions at the City West were possibly even worse than they were in Leicester because it's not in Dublin. It's 45 minutes outside of Dublin. And despite there being transport links to get you in and out, it's just not great. So the weekend looked good at the City West and a good party atmosphere, but actually midweek was possibly even worse in Dublin. If you go back and watch it, I think we've got this love affair with Dublin, the same way that we've got the Reebok and whatever for the UK Open and things like that. Like, oh, wasn't everything better back then? Not really. Is the honest truth. Like, there's just a little bit of something there. Right, we do need to look ahead to tomorrow night's final. Mike Decker against Luke Humphries, best of 11 sets. Been really, really impressed with Mike Decker as a whole with his tournament, Dan, as we said earlier. Been showing really good form throughout this year on the Pro Tour, etc. However, without being disrespectful to him, I feel like you and pretty much everybody else in the chat room, the question isn't going to be, can he? It's more, how many sets does he get against Luke? Because Humphries has been an absolute monster since he won this title this time last year. Gone on to pick up titles here, there, and everywhere. Rightfully the favourite to go and win everything else between now and the end of the year as well. The only reason that I think Littler gets close to him in the bookies is that so many people are lumping on it, just balances the books that way. Is that so many people are looking
it's very much a financial issue, yeah.
Yeah. It's not based off of form or perception or anything like that. It's very much this protects losses in case Luke wins, rather than this is what the book actually should read. Cool Hand's just an animal.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Oh, crikey. It's getting late. I'll give him 2. 6-2. I don't think Luke will reach the level we saw today, but I don't think he'll need to. Mike will play all right, and I think he will take his chances and he'll hold enough legs of darts to keep himself not in the game, but to keep himself from being embarrassed. It's probably the best way of putting it. I think 6-2 is relatively fair, and it'll probably be 2-1, and then it'll be 4-2. And as soon as the finish line's in sight, Humphries will just put his foot down and blow him away.
Similar logic for me. I think Decker will start brightly. His double 16, 1-4-6 combos have been really, really impressive this week. And he does have the 180 power to go and match Humphries throughout the game. But I just think the moment, big first final, if Humphries clicks into gear at any point for a set or two, he's got that ability to take it away. And that just makes it that much more difficult for Decker to play with freedom throughout the entirety of the final. I'm going to give him one more set. I'm going to say 6-3 for Luke Humphries in the final. Some predictions in the chat room then. Maliki says 6-3 Humphries. Video Smurf says 6-5 Decker. We're going all the way, and a win for the Belgian. That'd be a first title for him. Matthew says 6-2 to Luke. Jamie says 6-0. Mike will, as per usual, players have a good week. 6-2 Luke Humphries says Kieran. 6-2 as well, says Cross Court Tennis. 6-3 Humphries says Patrick. Tommy Boy's 6-2 as well. Decker slowing down. Well, he will have learned from his opponent this evening if that's possible, I guess. So that's pretty much what the chat room is saying. Now,
Bob's in as well. Get Bob's on. He's a member, so he always gets on the screen no matter what.
Bob's gone 6-2 for Luke as well.
He's a wise man as well.
TikTok. Right. Normally we'd just say that's it now after we've done a prediction, but we're going to end in a slightly weird fashion. The Luke Humphries clip is available for you. We're not going to react to it. That is going to be the last thing you see on this show. So we're going to leave with Luke, and then you'll see the end credits. So if you want to catch that interview, go over and see it in full on our YouTube channel in a couple of moments' time. But for now, this has been the final Fallout Bar of the week. A big, big thank you to Dan, who has been absolutely excellent on virtually every single show this week, making it his own. Much appreciated now that I'm a little bit too busy to be doing every single night, but you've absolutely smashed it, pal. To everyone else that's jumped on this week, Carwin, Harry, Cam, anyone else I've missed?
No, that's a lot. We had decent bit of variation among the team this week, other than me, who's managed to drag myself out every day. But yeah, we've had a few good chats with a few different people. It's been a good week.
Good squad indeed. And of course, big thank you to Phil, who has been in Leicester throughout the week, getting us all the interview content that are available in full on our YouTube channel now. But as I said, we are going to leave you with the reigning champ in his post-match press conference after this evening. A big thank you to everybody for tuning in. Enjoy the final tomorrow. And we hope to see you on Monday night for the live lounge. See you in a bit.
Honestly, when I was like 2-3-0 up, I was thinking, this feels good. I don't feel I can lose. Doesn't mean I couldn't lose. I just felt that way, and you have to be careful not to allow that confidence to overtake, because if you think too far ahead, the game's not won. I was still 2 sets away. I just felt like I was playing so well, and even when I looked up at the stats, when I was like, I just turned to the left and I see I was obviously the last set, and it's 98 average. I think the average was, and I was thinking, if I got in 5 darts there, I could get my first 100 average, and that was just playing through my mind. That's how confident I was through the game. And then when I went out in 5 and I see the stats, I thought I finally achieved something that I think is quite hard to when I was hitting 100 average in such a long format in a double in. So yeah, it's quite a nice achievement. Phil, like I just said, Phil would do this game in, game out. I have 1 out of 5 of them games, so you can't compare me to Phil, never. And he'll always achieve more than any single player the world's ever seen. No one will ever be able to do what he's done. Michael had that period, he was just unbelievable. Like the same as game in, game out. So yeah, I don't need to compare myself to Phil, Michael. I'd love to be here in 20 years to be known as the 3rd best player or the 4th or 5th. It's just, for me, I just want to keep achieving and keep building the accolades up. I said it on stage earlier, if I can win tomorrow, it really would mean a lot to me. I think 9 major finals, 6 major wins with the World Cup in 12 months. I just don't see that being beaten over the next 10 years, to be honest. I think that's quite I'm not saying that to sound big-headed, I just think that's an accolade that's going to be incredibly hard to be beaten.